Flow is something that existed way before Csikszentmihalyi developed the flow concept. We all know what flow is. It's when you're in a heightened state of awareness and of engagement with what you're doing. What I wanted to take from flow is, how does the audience, in listening to music, how do you achieve flow in that sense? And as a composer, this is what we're all concerned with. How do we organize our materials? What do our materials kind of trigger in the audience? And so I was interested in creating a somewhat more analytical understanding of my musical instincts in terms of flow. And I was also interested in, how does the audience stay or maintain in flow? It was an important way for me to think about music, because it got away from preconceived structures. That was what I was doing a lot before. So the beginning of the cello piece starts off with these very loud sforzandi, zoom, on an A. And then every time it comes back, you hear a trailing, soft, descending melody. And it's very nice and soft and legato, except those sforzandi keep coming back, and they interrupt the melody every time. So they're both interrupting and starting the melody again. Except I take into account the fact that we've heard it before. So it's not just starting the melody again. It's not like just looping on a record player, but it's actually starting a similar melody, but one that's reflective of what we heard before. So there's this idea of reiteration, but then there's also this idea of development within the melody that gets spun out. And this creates what I would call multiple linearities. So we have music that's constantly pointing, but every time we hear it again, it's pointing in a slightly different direction. So you get lots of pointers. And as the first movement evolves, it's about 4 minutes long. Different techniques come in that continue to go in different directions. So harmonic glissandi come in, and the kind of extreme sul ponticello comes in, and it becomes a very, it's a virtuosic piece in terms of timbral performance. And Alex Waterman is just phenomenal at this. I wrote the first piece, and then I said, well, there's a lot here. I'm not necessarily the materials, but the concept is very powerful. And I thought, this is quite a challenge. I've written a piece that's very chiseled, that's very direct, it's very linear, but it's also very multilinear, because so many lines are coming in and out. So I wanted to see if I could write more music that didn't have that moment where the ear can wander. I wanted to keep things very focused, and I wrote one piece this way. And then I got the idea, well, what if I wrote a whole cycle of pieces? Can you write an hour's worth of music without letting the music just drift? And this was a big challenge, you know. This was a new form of experimentation. The third movement, or the third section of the duo, is one that I call sinistre. It's sinisterly, and in it, the two instruments are propelling this somewhat fragmented linearity, but they do it with these extreme solpanticello and pretty almost artificial heavy vibrato. And this is very typical of what I want to do. Is I find a sound. That sound, the sound you hear in the first measure of that piece, that's the sound of the whole piece. And then I just let that sound evolve. This particular piece is quite short. It's only 1.5 minutes long, or this particular section. But I just take it and I let it evolve, and I let the materials kind of open up. At the same time, I let the timbre of the instruments open up. Find ways that at this point, it's a little too static because they're always playing rhythmically together. So then I disalign them, I bring them back, and then the piece has this rather big ending, one of the most classically intense endings of the whole cycle. But it serves its function, and certainly in the scope of the whole cycle, we get to hear the violin playing this really high vibrato sound, which you don't hear the whole rest of the piece, you know. So that's interesting to me, getting a small sound that evolves in its own rate, and then it ends, and then we go on to something else.